بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين.
Bismillah wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum again, and Jazakallah for inviting me to be a part of this event. There's lots to discuss. I'll be as quick as I can, inshallah. A bit about myself. My name is Zilur. I am a solicitor. I qualified in 2007. Currently a partner for a firm called Rahman Low Solicitors. We're a niche employment law practice, specialised in employment law, acting for both employers and employees, predominantly employees. But we also, there's one other area that we also specialise in as well, which is defamation law, media defamation law. Recently represented an organisation that many brothers and sisters may be familiar with, an individual as well, Cage and Muazzam Beg, in respect to their claim against the Times and the defamatory article that was written about them recently. And we are a Legal 500 recognised firm, which ranks us. Legal 500 is a ranking site that ranks all all law firms with respect to their fields, and alhamdulillah, we are ranked amongst the highest of employment law firms in the country. So, I mean, in terms of legal career, I mean, there's two different paths, and of course, there's many different fields within law, many different disciplines. You know, you've got, contractual law, you've got commercial law, you've got property law, employment law, as I said, media, entertainment, corporate banking, and so on. There's so many different fields, and sometimes, I've got people, cousins or relatives or friends, they call and they want advice on a particular area of law that I have no understanding or experience in. It may be an immigration issue, for example. And I always say to them, it's the same as the medical profession. You may be someone who's an expert in, for example, a brain, for example, brain surgery, whatever it may be. And if someone calls you about a problem about their foot, it's unlikely that you'd be able to assist them. And it's the same with law as well. You've got many different fields, and each has its own discipline, of course. In terms of the two different areas, usually it's slightly different to the legal career in the US, for example. So in the US, you have a lawyer or an attorney, if you like. And here in the UK, you've got solicitors, you've got barristers. And the difference between the two really is that with solicitors, they usually do all the preparatory work. I mean, they've also got rights of audience, so they can also do advocacy work, such as speaking in presenting in courts, for example. But mostly they don't. So usually they do all the preparatory work, all the drafting is usually done by solicitors, all the client engagement, the contact. So cases effectively always built by the solicitors themselves. And the barristers then come into play when the cases get in the actual hearing itself, and they then present the case at the hearing. So that's the slight difference between the two professions. The barrister wouldn't really have any client engagement. All their work is usually done through the solicitor, and it's only at the hearing that they may then meet with the client, of course. In terms of what you need to study, of course, I mean, there's no, it's not an obligation that you must do your degree in law. You can do any degree you want. You can do, study history, whatever it is you want. But of course, if you do so, the only difference if you study law or do law as a major, as a degree in your undergraduate studies, is that you don't then need to do an additional year as a conversion called the GDL, which of course just means an additional year, and of course additional costs as well. So so if you did the straight law degree route, you'd do your 3 years, and then depending on, but of course, if you did history or English or any other discipline, and then you wanted to do law, you'd then have to do an additional year, which is called a conversion course. So that's an additional year. Once you've finished that, you then, depending on which path you want to go down, it's going to be a barrister or a solicitor. Either way, if you're a barrister, you'd need to do what's called the bar vocational course, the BVC, which is a year. It's for a period of a year. Of course, you're doing it over part-time, it's over 2 years. And then after that, you've then got to do what's called a pupillage, which is for an additional year as well. If you're going down the solicitor's path, then again, you've got to do a course that's called the legal practice course, the LPC, and that's for a year. And again, of course, if you're going to do it part-time, it's over a period of 2 years. And then after that, whereas in the barrister's case, the pupillage lasts for 1 year. In the solicitor's case, the training contract that you must obtain whilst you're a trainee solicitor, that lasts for 2 years. So it's 1 additional year. And then after that, once you've done the pupillage, you're then a qualified barrister. You've then got to get tenancy, so you've got to get a chambers to take you on. Barristers are in fact self-employed, and they work as part of the chambers where the work comes through. Solicitors, of course, you need to get a training contract first, and then you need to join a firm and then work accordingly. I mean, in terms of the skills necessary for both, I suppose it depends on which. I suppose if you want to go into being a barrister, I'd say it's something that if you enjoy public speaking, then it's something that's certainly suited towards you. Enjoy sort of arguing, debating. It's something that I think you should think about. If you don't enjoy that, as I did personally, then of course the solicitor's route is there for you. But in respect to both disciplines, I think the skills that are necessary, I think you've got to have those analytical skills. You've got to enjoy reading, lots of reading, of course, but not just reading, but also comprehension, understanding and applying, because a lot of the times it's about reading and applying. I think you've got to enjoy working with people. I think that cuts across whatever profession that you do, and some of the others speakers that we've heard as well. And it requires a lot of commitment, a lot of hard work. It is a very competitive industry, but that shouldn't put you off. You should see it as a challenge. And I think whatever you do, you should certainly do it with ikhlas, and you should do it with ihsan. Unfortunately, sometimes you find people want a shortcut to success, and I think Sheikh Haytham mentioned when a lot of these Ponzi schemes were going around, and I think he mentioned, I remember him saying that, the advice he often gives to youth is that there isn't any shortcut, unfortunately. Whatever you want to do, you're going to hear, you have heard, and you will hear from other individuals as well from different career paths. It always requires hard work. It always requires commitment. So you're not going to get away from that. If you want that career, you're going to have to do that. And then, once you've done it, try to dedicate yourself to that profession that you've joined, in terms of wanting to be as good as you possibly can, trying to be the best, learning from people. Sometimes I see many lawyers, they become solicitor, for example, and after finishing their training within 2 years, they're setting up their own firms. It's good they've got that entrepreneurial spirit, and it's good that we should have that. But have they really learned enough to be opening up their own firms? Is that person really dedicated to the profession to really be learning, to be good, really grounded in their work before they go off and set up their own practice? And it's a very rewarding profession. As I said, you get to work on many interesting cases, meet many interesting individuals. From a financial perspective, of course, it's very rewarding as well. And again, it depends on what area of law you go into. The salaries obviously vary depending on the discipline. So, for example, if you're going to be working in immigration, it's probably going to be more legal aid type work, which again, legal aid is a dying phenomenon as well, unfortunately. But of course, if you're then going into corporate law, then again the salary is going to be considerably higher. But of course, that can also mean sometimes you find some of the solicitors that do corporate work, because the hours, they're working significantly long hours. Sometimes they're staying in the office. Some of these large corporate magic circle firms, they provide sleepover beds for the solicitor to stay in, because sometimes the clients that you're working with might be in a different country, might be in China, America, and the time zones are different. So there are those things to think about in terms of your work-life balance, and sometimes that can burn you out as well. So things to think about. And of course, always, I think if you're going into a career, think of what area you enjoy as you're studying it, and try to then work a path towards that particular area, for example. So if it's employment that you're interested in, and work towards that. doesn't then sometimes you find people studying topics or electives or options as they're going along, and it's got nothing, you know, they may, and you've got to be realistic about where you're going to likely to end up. If you haven't studied in you know, a prestigious university, for example, then, you know, the chance of you getting into a magic circle firm, it's not necessarily impossible, but it's going to be that much more difficult. And so, you know, if you're doing your electives, you know, think about what kind of firm you're going to be going into, or more likely to be going into, because it's no point you studying those topics to get into a firm that you're not going to be getting into. So, you know, think about those things as well. And you know, I think a point that Ustad Omar mentioned right at the beginning about activism. Again, I think whatever discipline you go into, whichever career path you become, you know, whether it's an engineer, teacher, a lawyer, whatever it may be, I think, you know, every one of us should be activists. And, you know, Allah Jalla wa Ala has given us all specific skills and abilities that He hasn't given to someone else. And He's given that to us, and we should show our gratitude to Allah, and we should use that for the service of Allah. So even if it's something you might be doing, property law, for example, and you might think that that's got nothing to do with your deen or contributing to the deen, but of course you can still use whatever skills that you've got to, you know, it may well be you could contribute to your local masjid, for example. They may have some property transactions or some things that they need assistance with. So you can still apply that. It's all transferable skills. So all I'm saying is whatever you do, make use of that for the purpose of furthering the Allah's cause as well. And that's all. Jazakumullah khair.